Okay, perfect. All right, so some more people will trickle in and that'll occur. But thank you everyone for joining thus far. So my name is AJ Boyce. I work for the Nature Conservancy. I am one of their agricultural conservation practitioners. And essentially the purpose of this meeting is to explore the agroforestry resources that are available for technical assistance providers and also for landowners within Ohio. When I say technical assistance, it's not just people who are like designated TSPs through NRCS, but anyone working with landowners who are interested in any type of agroforestry practice. I was just trying to provide more resources so that way we can better service them. So we're going to start off with, we have a few people lined up. I'm going to start off with a program with the Nature Conservancy, then move on to Virginia Tech, OSU, CSU, and Rural Action, because there are abundance of resources that are coming through in Ohio. And I'm going to go ahead and also, the meeting is being recorded for further viewing, and also people wanted to me to send it out to them later. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Oh, I also will say that for the format, if you have any questions while people are presenting, please go ahead and drop it in the Q&A, and then we'll try to answer those in the chat. After everyone has presented, we will then go through and do like a more formal Q&A to answer whatever hasn't already been attended to within the chat. Cool. So as I said, I am AJ Boyce. I work for the Nature Conservancy of Ohio, and we essentially work with farmers to better, or rather to further the adoption of best management practices. That can be in-field, edge of field, or out of field, being cover crops, things like conservation and drainage water management, and then also wetlands. Because agricultural land can be managed in such a multitude of ways, we are expanding our strategy all the time, and that is now including agroforestry production. So we have a full name is Expanding Agroforestry Production and Markets for Producer Profitability and Climate Stabilization. However, you'll most likely just see it as EAP. And with the EAP, it is a 60 million PCSC, which is a Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities grant that is dropping down in 30 different states with a multitude of partners. And we are trying to further agroforestry plantings through incentivized payments. So, come on, there we go. So when I first started to think about agroforestry, or my first introduction was more like a tropical context, growing things like cassava, cacao, and cocoa underneath the canopy. However, it does not have to be only in tropical. It has a lot of implications and applicability for North America as well. So this picture is of the Hill Farm, which is within Central Ohio, with over 60,000 chestnut trees in the alley cropping system. It was formerly corn and soy, but it is now 4,000 acres that is alley cropping chestnuts and hay. And they're on track to be one of the largest chestnut producers in North America. So agroforestry, what is it and why are we doing it? So it is the intentional integration of trees and shrubs into crop and animal farming systems for those environmental, economic, and social benefits that we all know and love. And it is currently only practiced on about 1.5% of US farmland. You'll see different numbers. I've seen like less than 7. Regardless, it's a very marginal amount of US farmland. And so we are trying to expand that practice adoption for all of the environmental and potential economic benefits that it has, because we can diversify our revenue streams to make farmers more economically resilient through timber, nut, fruit, forage, and livestock products that can also increase environmental health, the livestock health, and environmental and economic resilience. This is part of a reforestation or even afforestation effort that can be very challenging because there is a large lack of knowledge about how the practices are done, funding sources for them, having confidence to actually plant these things, plant availability and succession, because agroforestry, usually you're in this for the long haul. And so you need to figure out, what am I going to do with this land and what's going to be happening with this land after I am gone. But it is one tool in the toolbox of these, regenerative agriculture practices, and it has its own suite of practices underneath it. So it's very important that we try to further its adoption. So, oops. There are currently five, technically six USDA recognized practices. You can include urban agroforestry here as well. However, for the purposes of this grant or this, award, we are going to be focusing on the following three: alley cropping, windbreaks, and silvopasture. And the alley cropping, it's really important to mention that alley cropping can be used to transition land, so it doesn't always have to stay in alley cropping, but it can be a way of foresting a system to turn into something else later. And for silvopasture, it's important to acknowledge that we are not supporting silvopasture that is through subtraction or woodlot conversion. So this is prioritizing practices that are going to be installing new trees on new acres. So partnering for plantings. Like I said, this is a huge $60 million grant, and TNC can only do so much of the work. So we have a lot of project partners who are going to be helping us with this lift. So it's a 5-year program that was just released last year in 2023, it runs through 2028, with $36 million going directly to farmer for incentivized payments for plantings. The rest of the funding is more so for the administrative support and the capacity of all of those project partners, so that way they can further do that work, make sure these applications are really, really nice. They are very strong agroforestry demonstrations, and also to enable marketing conditions later on down the line, with that goal of incentivizing private investment in the agroforestry industry for all of those benefits to the environment and also to their income. One thing to mention is that since this is through USDA, it is public funding, and that means that people who apply are not able to double dip. So if you want to use this funding, that's great, but you can't use the same practice on the same acres with that federal funding. You're going to, if you want to use federal funding for other acres that are not currently having this funding source being applied to it, that's totally fine. It's just that you can't use the same practice on the same acres. And once again, it's prioritizing new plantings for agroforestry, not so much strengthening or bolstering existing ones. So we have a lot of national project partners. This list includes most of them. And the highlighted ones have a little bit more applicability when it comes to educational resources and their involvement within Ohio. There are especially a lot of really good educational resources via Appalachian Sustainable Development, Propagate, Savannah Institute, the Center for Agroforestry, and Virginia Tech. In the Nature Conservancy, we are handling all of those funds. We have a few educational resources on our website. However, those other people have like the bread and butter of the knowledge that you need to know. And we also have more regional project partners that are even smaller, which are represented on this call that are not represented on this list, such as Rural Action, CSU, Agraria, and the Beginner Forest Farming Network. So our goals, like I said, is trying to touch down in 30 different states, which are all divided into their regions. Ohio is in the Mid-Atlantic/Central Appalachian region. And so our regional lead is going to be Virginia Tech. So we want to have at least 200 farmers engaged, with a minimum of 50 of those self-identifying as underserved producers. And underserved producers with the USDA is very broad. So that can be veterans, limited resource, small farms making less than $350,000 annual gross income, socially disadvantaged women, specialty crop, and it's all self-identifying. And we want to make sure that we have 30,000 acres of new plantings within those 30 states. It's important to recognize who the regional leads are, because those are the people who will be verifying, or rather approving, all of the applications. So with our regional lead being Virginia Tech, all of our projects must be approved by Virginia Tech. People can still, like if say, let's say a landowner is working already with someone providing them technical assistance, that's great. We're not trying to break apart existing connections. We still want you to work with them. However, when it comes to having your application approved, we still need you to be a part of the Virginia Tech for Ohio. Needs to be approved by them. Currently, we have 213 applications in 21 states, representing a potential 6,300 acres of new agroforestry plantings. And out of those 213, 93 have been self-reported underserved. And these numbers were from about a month ago, so I'm sure even more have come in. So our regional partners will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, offering that regionalized technical assistance and outreach to farmers, performing those site visits, doing the land management plans. And then also we want to create a network of demonstration farms for education and outreach activities. And when people apply on the application, they can decide if they want to be a demonstration farm or a research farm. There's a few other things that come along with that. However, people also want to opt out of being a research farm at any time they can. And then also, like I said, a big part of this is enabling market conditions so that way this could be profitable. And that's working with companies and retailers to identify barriers and solutions to market growth and assess demand for agroforestry products. Cool. So we have a 5-step process of which we are in those first 2 steps, right? The outreach and recruitment, and then that enrollment and technical services. So within this year 1, we're developing capacity for technical assistance through recruitment and cross-training, and then also with regional TSPs collaborating to share insight, barriers, and expertise, because we want to get a better understanding of the agroforestry landscape. What projects have the most applicability for which region, and which communities are trying to do what type of practices. After that, we have the agroforestry demonstration farm plantings, measurement reporting and verification, and then lastly, that enabling conditions so that we can develop those markets. So this is a rather convoluted diagram, but I'll walk you through it. It's not too difficult. So essentially, the first step is people can join our email list by going to nature.org/expanding agroforestry. There's a lot of resources there, such as an FAQ, a few agroforestry like technical resources, as well as that's where people can apply for the program and sign up for the email list. So after people have gone to that website and applied for the signed up for the email list, they will receive continued updates about the status of the program, and also when enrollment cycles will be starting. So there are 2 enrollment cycles per year. We've already stopped our first enrollment cycle. However, we are in our second one, which ends June 4th of 2024. And producers will get a response about 3 to 4 months after submitting their application. If people are not selected for it, their application is not selected, that's totally fine. We want to make sure that as many applicants have strong proposals. So we'll work with them to provide them feedback on how to become more eligible and have a stronger application for that next round of funding. So even if people are not selected, they can always go back, workshop their application, and then come back that next enrollment cycle. After people have been selected and approved for the program, then they'll be partnered with their regional technical service provider, that regional lead, to develop that agroforestry plan, and also to make sure that all the required paperwork for eligibility is in order. Like I said, if people want to work with their previous technical service providers, that's totally fine, but they have to take part of our technical assistance program as well. Otherwise, they are not going to be able to be eligible for the program. They'll be removed from the program. So we have to stay a part of it, but you can still keep whatever local resources and relationships that those landowners are already working with. So after people enter that agreement with TNC, they will then receive their first payment because they're going to be breaking down into 3 different payments. People have 18 months after that first payment to do that first planting, because we know it takes time to procure stock. And then after that planting is done, they'll receive that second transition incentive payment within 60 days. And also within 6 months of that first planting is when people need to do that first soil test and measurement of diameter at breast height of the trees. So that way we can do the measurement and reporting and the verification. There's only 2 times people need to do that. The first time, 6 months after the planting, and then the second time is in the last year, which will be 5 years after the trees are planted. And then after they take that last soil test, that last DBH measurement, that is when they will receive that third and final payment. So we currently have 2 pay structures, which is, let's say, category 1. Producers will receive a per tree incentive payment of about $30 per tree, and then a transition payment of $450 acres, and that will be broken down into those 3 different payments. The second category is if a producer has any type of private or third party funding source for the installation incentive of the trees. And then they'll still receive that $450 transition payment broken down into three different payments. $450 per acre. So eligibility, there is currently a 5 acre minimum, unless you're in Hawaii, then it is one, but we're in Ohio, so 5 acres minimum for new plantings. So even if it is existing plantings, you have a beautiful alley cropping system, it has to be new plantings. So you need access to new land, and you need to have access to that land through 2028, meaning that it must be owned or leased through 2028, or at least through the 5 years of this process. Of course, they must comply with our measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification guidelines, which I said is just that DBH and soil testing twice throughout those 5 years, and also complying with NRCS practice standards, for which silver pasture, those practice standards do not currently exist for Ohio unless they've been made recently. But the other two practices do have those. I also will say that once again, people can be a demonstration farm. The only caveat with that is they must have one dedicated field day per year, which can have around 50 people. And then people can also be a research farm. And with the research farm, they will gain $1 per tree that is evaluated throughout the program period. As I said, they can drop out of the research period at any time. So there are a few agroforestry funding sources in Ohio. This is the expanding agroforestry production one that I'm speaking about right now. However, there's the catalyzing agroforestry program, farms branching out, and you're going to hear about both of those today, fortunately. Woo. And then a few cost share programs through NRCS. However, I will say again, if you're using NRCS funding, you can't double dip. So you can't use NRCS funding on the same acres that you're using expanding agroforestry production funding on. However, if you find a private funding source, you can definitely use those two funding sources on the same acres. So once again, the website is nature.org/expanding agroforestry, and people can go to join the email list. Once they click on that, they will receive this page, which will just allow them to further sign up. And then also, if you go to nature.org expanding agroforestry, you'll see a very useful FAQ. It's an 11-page document. It has the majority of the questions that you could already think of answered. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to me. I will also add that there is no income maximum. So I know for some NRCS programs, if you make over a certain amount, you are not eligible. But for this one, it does not matter how much you make, you are eligible to apply for the program. And anyone can apply so long as they are registered with the FSA. So it doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit, a university, a producer, just so long as you have that proper paperwork, then you're eligible to apply for the program. And that's it for EAP. So yeah, that's my contact. There's the website, and you'll always reach out to me for further questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I am going to hand it over to Ian. And Ian Nichols works with Virginia Tech. He is the Agroforestry Project Associate at Virginia Tech. He's going to share with us a little bit more about the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program and ARC Exchange. So, Ian, whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks, AJ. Hello, everybody. So
And I'm not sure if you care, Ian. It's in presenter view.
Okay, hold on a sec. Is that better?
Yeah, it's not in presenter view. It's whatever you want.
Oh, I know, it's because I'm using a monitor. I'll just have to use it as this. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is kind of I'm Ian Nichols again. This is the more private side to a big grant program like the Expanding Agroforestry Production. So catalyzing agroforestry grant program. And so I'm going to talk about agroforestry in Ohio and some of our projects that we've got. And so again, the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program, this is a private grant. And so we're working in all states except for Alaska. And so I'll just do a quick run through of the grant program, go through some agroforestry practices that we fund, just quickly talk about the benefits, and then give some farm examples. And with the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program, the part of that catalyzing part is the ARC exchange. And so that's a peer-to-peer network we're building where farmers that we fund, then they can be demonstration farms to show other people in their community how these practices work, how to install them, and the pros and benefits of installing these practices. And then at the end, just briefly touch upon the EAP grant, because Virginia Tech is lead on that for the second round coming up in the following years in Ohio. And so the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation, they're the ones funding the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant. And so basically it's a private foundation and they looked at what are the best ways to mitigate climate change. And what they came up with was agroforestry was the best way to do that for the least amount of money and the most benefits. And so what we're doing is we're giving direct financial support to farmers. And our application is geared more towards people that have done research and they have an idea in their head of what kind of agroforestry project they want to install. And then they go through our application, provide design details, photos, and then that's how we're able to decide which projects are the best and the most likely to succeed and help us catalyze agroforestry in the US. And so with that, for the open field practices, it's up to 1,500 an acre, and that goes down with acreages because unlike the EAP, we have less funds. So we're pretty much max 12 acres is what we're going to fund unless it's a unique project. And then bigger projects we can help funnel towards the EAP grant. And so, but we're funding all of agroforestry practices, including urban food forests. And so that also includes forest farming, which is a slightly different funding model just because it's more work in a sense, because hand planting an acre of ginseng is a lot of work. But it also has different costs, such as cleaning out invasives in a forest. And so again, when people sign up for this grant, they're also agreeing to be part of the ARC exchange. And so with that, our partners like Rural Action, this year, they're going to be putting on 3 farm tours. And so that's a way for farmers that have gotten funded through the project and have installed the systems can then actually communicate with their community what went right, why they did it, and mainly the benefits and how it's helping their farm improve. Because this is about getting trees into farms as farm infrastructure. And again, our partners, we work with Appalachian Sustainable Development, Rural Action, North Carolina State University, and silviculture. And so just a quick rundown of some of the types of agroforestry projects we fund. And within our application, you can do multiple practices. So some people are doing alley cropping, and then as the trees mature, they're putting in forest farming underneath. And so there's lots of ways you can integrate these practices on your farm. And so alley cropping is a pretty versatile one. And within this, you're also going to be adding space for increasing biodiversity, which is going to help with pollinators. And so in addition to, you can plant nitrogen fixing trees to help the soil. And so there's a lot of benefits to this. And you can kind of think of it as you're using the edges around the trees, that microclimate. So it might not grow the same crops you're growing in the main areas, but this microclimate might be better for certain partial shade plants or other things like that. So it can be hay and chestnuts like AJ was talking about, or it can be much more complex with nitrogen fixers and pollinator specific trees to really gain more benefits from the system. And then silvopasture. And so this has been highlighted to help with mitigate heat stress with shade. But we've found with a lot of the farmers we're funding, they're looking for that added income benefit. And so it be it nuts or fruit from trees or shrubs, or then creating value-added products with having acorn raised pork in the end. And so there's lots of ways you can integrate silvopasture in your farm. We also have an issue where we're only funding converting planting trees to create silvopasture. We can't fund thinning trees to create silvopasture. And that is a hole in much of the funding for these practices. And it should be noted that silvopasture, by definition, a lot of it is focused on livestock, but it also works very well with poultry. And so even poultry tractors having that shade along the route can help a lot with heat stress. And so this riparian forest buffer is kind of improving the idea of just a riparian buffer. And so this is adding trees, but within those trees, there's diversity. And so your first zone is really focused on those trees that can handle erosion, a lot of water, like the typical riparian species you're thinking of. But then expanding in those other zones, putting in more production for a farm. So fruit and nut trees, woody florals like dogwoods that you can sell in markets, willows for baskets, things like that. There's a lot of ways to integrate trees into the farm that can provide added income besides just the ecosystem benefits. And then windbreaks and shelter belts, much along the same lines. Like you can have just a functional windbreak that's typical of what you would normally see, but then now people are adding more species they can actually utilize on the farm. So again, it would be woody florals, you could add more shrubs, things like that. But it can also be aesthetics, or a focus on biodiversity. And then forest farming, again, this is just taking a mature forest or a canopied area and growing non-timber forest products. And so that could be forest botanicals, like golden seal, ginseng, ramps for markets, for restaurants, but also there's some fruit trees, pawpaws, mushrooms, tree syrups. It's a wide range of non-timber forest products. And with this, you can even grow things like wasabi, which is pretty interesting. And so this practice, the Catalyzing Agroforestry grant is funding this practice. There's not as many other grants that fund forest farming. And so again, this has a different funding model just because hand planting all those botanicals can be a lot of work. And so again, just the quick run through the benefits, getting that improved soil health. The increase in biodiversity and pollinators is something I'm really interested in. I'm going to study at Virginia Tech because then you're getting that increase in pollinators could be a really big benefit for a lot of these agricultural farms. But like I said, we've seen with forest farming and silvopasture, there's a big focus on adding income to the farm. And so it's not just shade that people are wanting out of these, it's integrating trees as infrastructure on the farm so they're producing income. And it's been proven with multiple studies that you're getting more resistance from heat stress, climate resilience with a lot of these systems. So even with alley cropping, by having that partial shade from the trees, you're providing some resistance to the heat for a lot of those crops you're growing. And so it's not just livestock that can benefit from the shade as the climate becomes more variable. And so then with the ARC exchange, again, that's the peer-to-peer learning model. And so this is getting at theories of change. And so that by bringing people within the community and helping them learn these practices, then they can speak to those practices to other people in the community and the benefits. And so this is the first year we've started it because we're using the people that we've funded previously. And so we had a panel session at the Virginia Biological Association of Farmers, and that went really well. And so far, most of the farmers, the projects have gone really, really well. The tree mortality is about what we expected, around 30%, but most of the farms had about 20%, 15%. And that's probably due to this being more connected to that project and paying attention to the individual trees more. But we did have some projects where they might have been on a slope and it went through a drought, and they did have 40 to 50% tree loss, which can happen. And so this year with our partners, we're having farm tours, and Rural Action is putting on the farm tours in Ohio. So reach out to them if you want to be part of that. And so just to run down a couple of farms we've funded, so you can see the variation with the trees and what people want to do. And so this is a CSA in a retirement community in Virginia. And the area where they wanted to install the agroforestry project is also a scenic area where people use that. So it had to have aesthetics, but also provide income for the CSA. And so they planted a fair amount of trees, 403 trees planted, a mix of fruit trees and nut trees, but also 249 willows, because they wanted to have a species bank of those willows for the CSA to create products, but also as a conservation purposes to preserve those willow species. And then also within that, putting in some fruit shrubs like gooseberries, currants, and all these are going into the market for the CSA. And they have dwarf meat goats, and that's why they're using metal cages like that. Because I would say with all the projects we have livestock, goats are the most difficult to deal with. And again, this farm also has goats, which is why there's electric wire around the cages too. So this is a family farm. We fund multiple types of producers, but they're also focused on being an agroforestry demonstration site. And so they're in a hollow, so it's a smaller footprint they have. So they planted 46 tree species, but much of them are native species that are productive cultivars. And so that's also why this farm was so appealing, because the producers are focused on natural nursery stock that's fit to the land. And this is a farm in North Carolina. It's at the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. And so they also worked with us and then contour lines to help get more trees planted. And so because we're a private grant, we were able to help fund them with our funding, but then Contour Lines was also able to come in and provide more trees and put in the swales. And so Southern Appalachian Highlands, they do a lot of workshops associated with their farming. There's a lot of education that goes on the farm. And so it's a great place to learn about these practices. And then in Ohio, and this farm will have, I believe, a farm tour this year. So it's 5 acres. And so they're a typical cattle farm, and so you can see their method of keeping the trees protected is running the electric wire along the tree plantings. And so they wanted to get long-term thinking and short-term thinking. So short-term, those loblolly hybrids, that's going to provide shade rather quickly. But in the long term, having the overstory of black walnut, chestnuts, and pecans. And so, and mixing in those nitrogen fixers, black locust. And with all these agroforestry systems, when livestock are involved, you're usually going to have rotations. It's hard to get away with not having that just because you need to protect the trees. But there may be ways to do that with poultry, to be creative. So this is a farm we funded in Georgia, but there's also a farm in Kentucky that's growing wasabi too. And so what people have been doing is growing wasabi in mountain spring creeks. And so there's lots of ways you can utilize your land for forest farming. And then another farm in North Carolina, Talus Slope Farm. And so they've got a blog, and they do a lot of education for forest farming. And then just another working farm in Virginia, but they do a lot of agritourism. And again, just so you can see the diversity that some people use with these systems. In general, the more diverse it is, the more ecosystem services you'll get out of it, but then also the more resilience you'll get out of it, because it's not just one monoculture of species. And their goal with this was also to have free fodder for pigs. And so that's why there's a lot of acorns, chestnuts, mulberries, honey locust, persimmon, the plums, and the hickories. Yeah, and so then just wrapping up. So we're also working with the Expanding Agroforestry project. And so AJ hit a lot on that. And so with the round 2 of applications coming in, we'll be more involved with that. And if you start applying for that, you'll probably start interacting with me. And that is it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. And reminder that if anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat whenever, anytime. And we are gonna keep it trucking. We're doing quite well on time. We're gonna move on to the Farms Branching Out program with OSU. So I'm gonna turn it over to Megan Edwards, who is a master's student at the OSU School of Environment and Natural Resources. So Megan, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, AJ. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen as well. I'm gonna actually present. Oh, okay, that's fine. Like this, like AJ said, I'm a master's student at OSU. And I'm a graduate research assistant with Dr. Doug Jackson-Smith, who's also on this call. And we are working on the Branching Out Agroforestry project, which is a multi-state project. And the other institutions involved are the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Michigan State University, Central State University here in Ohio. It's funded by the USDA National Agroforestry Institute and also involves the US Forest Service. But here in our state, points of contact are Leslie Horner, who's also on this call at Central State University. My advisor, Doug Jackson-Smith, and Kathy Smith and Jake Nicholson are part of our extension team at OSU and also in a loop on this project. So our objectives for this project, this is not so much a funding project as it is a combination of research and extension that aims to bring together agroforestry actors in the state. On the research end, we want to understand the current state of agroforestry practice in this region, accelerate practice uptake, and boost the viability of small and medium-sized farms. That's one of the objectives of the USDA Small and Medium-Sized Farms program that funds this grant, is to use agroforestry to boost that category of farmer. and also just to connect farm and forest focused professionals in the agroforestry space. Apologize for the large amount of text on this slide, but so this is sort of split between extension and research. On the extension side of things, we're really focused on linking together existing programs and resources on agroforestry. So we know that there's already a lot going on in this space that Rural Action is doing, TNC, Virginia Tech, and rather than repeating efforts, we want to sort of serve as a central point to publicize things that are going on. We want to consolidate information and learning experiences that people have and bring people together to talk about what they've learned while implementing agroforestry. So we want to partner with existing programs and organizations and hold some of our own peer-to-peer extension events in each of the 3 states of the project. We'll also be developing some case study videos to highlight agroforestry options that will be available to the public. And on the research side of things, we will be surveying practitioners as well as professionals and technical service providers. The practitioner survey will begin this spring and early summer of this year with a random statewide sample of landowners. So that will be a very short survey that goes out to a large number of people. We don't expect a large percentage of those folks to get back to us, but those who do will follow up with later in the summer of 2024 with a more detailed survey for interested or active agroforestry practitioners. And then we're still working on we're still working on when the professional survey will go out, but also the interview process will begin this summer and fall. And I'll have some contact information up on another slide about who to talk to if you're interested in that interview process. But that will be going on in all 3 states as well. So how can you get involved in this project? Well, in a general sense, if this research and extension project interests you, you can share your name, your contact info, and how you're connected to agroforestry with me or with Doug or Leslie, anyone involved in the project. If you are practicing agroforestry, you can host or attend a peer-to-peer exchange or a field day that we can organize and provide some funding for food and getting people there. We can connect you with a forester and extension to develop a management plan for your property. And you can participate in an interview or a case study video. If you're a technical service provider on the call, you can attend an agroforestry training for professionals, and we can help cover registration and travel for that. You can join one of our focus groups on best practices, take our survey once it's live, or you can participate in our field days and share your expertise. So our timeline for all of this, the main thing that we're on the call to talk to you all about is that this July, we're thinking of having a statewide agroforestry summit. And that would, the aim of that would be to bring together everyone involved in agroforestry in Ohio, everyone interested, to really learn from each other and talk about the future of agroforestry for the state. And we'd love your input on whether July is a good time for you, what this is an event you would even be interested in going to. And if you did go, where in the state you would want it to be, and what particular agroforestry practices you would like to see represented there. So feel free to drop suggestions in the chat or reach out to me or to Doug. Or if there's Q&A time later, we can talk about it, but that's, we definitely want it to be an event that is useful to people. And so we're seeking as much input as we can on designing the event. And then the interviews this summer and fall will be conducted by myself and by Samantha Bosco, who's a PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who will be leading the part of the project that does the case studies. And I have our emails on the screen there, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us if you're interested in that. And that's really the information that I wanted to share with you all. And AJ, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about input on the event in July. If not, then we can save that for later and move on.
There is time. We're plenty ahead of schedule. If there is any input that someone wants to offer, um, yeah, please do.
Hmm. I know in Ohio things really get spread out, so we've had debates on our own team about whether it's best to do an event in Southeast Ohio, where rural action has really built a lot of energy around this space, or to go to Northeast Ohio, where people might not have had as much access to those events. We know that there are probably agroforestry practitioners all over the eastern half of the state, and maybe even some in the western half of the state, and it's always tricky to decide where the best meeting place is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would love to see that summit happen. I'm going to be a part of that. I also don't have much to offer for input, but if anyone else does, yeah, please drop it or reach out later on. And if no one else does, then I will go ahead and move on to
Thank you.
Central State. Thank you, Megan, so much. Um, So we have Mark Amante and Denise Natoli Brooks from Central State University. They are both agriculture and natural resource extension educators. And they have also been working in the agroforestry space with landowners and have a little bit more hands-on knowledge about some of the tools. So whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Sure. Denise, do you want to share the presentation since you're going to be doing your demo as well? All right. And I guess I'll just tell you to move forward when we get a chance. So yeah, hi everybody. Welcome. Again, I'm Mark Amante. Denise Natoli Brooks is here, and we'll also be presenting. We're kind of splitting up slides here. And so our little talk today is just talking about what training and technology is available out there for TSPs, but also if you're a farmer, most of these things will apply to you as well. So like these are not like resources restricted only to technical service providers, but for anybody who wants to access them. So go ahead and move to the next slide, please, Denise. So just a little, some of you might not have heard of us. So we are Central State University Extension. We're an 1890 land grant institution, so a historically Black college. We are a new extension service. We first received our state and federal funding to develop an extension program in 2014. So this is our 10-year anniversary this year. And many of us educators weren't hired until 2020. So we are very new, growing rapidly. We are hiring if anybody's interested in a job, especially the A&R team. We're hoping to double our capacity within the next year or so. And our focus is, we want to complement the great work that Ohio State is doing throughout the state, but not duplicate effort. So our focus tends to be on small and beginning farmers, urban farms, specialty crop producers, and traditionally underserved groups. And agroforestry kind of falls into like that space as well. And I have a lot of personal interest in agroforestry, being an agroforestry farmer myself. And kind of one of the benefits of being a small team has been that, because I'm interested in agroforestry, now the university is interested in agroforestry. So, we have small regional teams. And, one thing as we're developing, and because we're new, we're really just now like building our research campus on campus, developing research and demonstration sites. So we're hoping to, create agroforestry demonstration sites on our land and do things like that. And we're all very open to partnerships and collaboration. If anybody is interested in that, you can always reach out to us at a later time. So we do a number of current programs in sort of the agroforestry space, particularly around outdoor mushroom cultivation. So we do a lot of statewide log inoculation workshops for doing mushroom log production and things like that, talking a little bit about both like the economics and practice of growing mushrooms outdoors, but also like tying into things like forestry in terms of, okay, how do you select the trees that you're going to be using for mushroom logs as part of, say, like a forest management plan and things like that. We've got some demonstration sites of mulched bed mushroom production in Dayton, Columbus, and Lancaster. We do a number of in-person and online or YouTube presentations for just like overview of the 5/6 like supported agroforestry practices. We have some specific to silvopasture and alley cropping, and again, particularly forest farming is where a lot of our interests and personal experience lie. We do have some presentations and info out there on specific high value crops like chestnut, pawpaw, and elderberry. We provide on-site technical assistance, evaluation, and just like consulting with folks. And again, we're actively developing more programming and working to collaborate and with just like doing programs, developing technical assistance, and things like that. So again, if this is something you're interested in, we are very open to partnering with you. So we have a number of partnerships we're working on. I am on a grant that is pending. We'll see if we get it or not. Working with Ohio State University. Part of this is an integrated pest management grant, but part of the part that I'm focusing on is on IPM for mushroom cultivation. Particularly, it's for both indoor and outdoor, but there's not a lot of great resources out there for outdoor mushroom IPM. So, this is something that there's a lot of research that needs to be done. There's a lot of great grant opportunities in the agroforestry space. For research, for farmer-led opportunities through SARE and things like that. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Denise works very closely with the Ohio Organic Farmer Researcher Network with OFA and Ohio State. There's again the number of projects we're working with through them. And Denise, if you want to comment on these, I know you're more tied into them, or Leslie, I guess if you want to, since you're on too. The Southeast Women Only Woodlands Group, partnering with Rural Action, Soil Water Conservation District, Ohio State University, and I'm not sure who DOF is, Denise. So,
Division of Forestry.
Oh,
and
that makes
Mark
sense.
and I are so excited about agroforestry that we just keep talking about it. So I am actually going to jump in, Mark, and talk about the programs that I'm a little more involved in. Like you alluded to. So I'm going to go back to Ohio Organic Farmer Researcher Network. The intention of this network is to really highlight and elevate the fact that farmers are researchers, informal researchers, a lot of the time, and sometimes formal researchers. And this says, let's get together as a group of practitioners. In this case, let's use agroforestry as an example, different aspects of it. How do we take those questions we're always asking as farmers and turn them into formal questions, researchable questions as a group, partner with the researchers at organizations like OSU and Central State University and support from OFA, the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, and go for funding to do our research projects, real research projects on our working farms. So it's pretty cool. We do have an agroforestry interest group within this network that meets monthly on a virtual platform. And then a few times during the year for in-person workshops and working groups. We've actually just had our first few grants awarded to farmers that took questions and turned them into research projects. So real excited about this group. And then Southeast Women Only Woodlands is associated with our Ohio Interagency Forestry Management team with multiple entities, organizations involved in that, USDA, Forest Service, Division of Forestry, Division of Wildlife, Central State, OSU, but really looking at oak regeneration, especially Southeast Ohio. But Women Owning Woodlands is a great example of partnership and collaboration because it's a specific group of woodland owners that are supporting each other to better manage their woodlands for whatever purposes they focus on. I think the agroforestry has a ton of potential in this space. And then we look at agroforestry research too, just because there's so much opportunity to learn more about how agroforestry in Ohio and the different parts of Ohio work. So an interesting area that Central State looks at is nutraceuticals. So of these products that grow in the forest that we are talking about here, what are their like pharmaceutical benefits, health benefits to us? It's another under-researched area within agroforestry. So we are all about partnership and collaboration. We see it as the way to really elevate agroforestry in Ohio. And us as TSBs and as agroforestry farmers as well.
Oh.
So Mark, this is your slide.
Okay, I don't know why I have it. You can just, yeah, go through so it's all popped up.
It's very dramatic.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was set up to do that. That's probably a holdover from the presentation I converted this into. Yeah, so there's a lot of great learning opportunities for TSPs out there and for farmers. Some of these were already mentioned. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So there's the Savannah Institute, which is based out of Wisconsin, and is primarily active in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, moving into Michigan. And they do want to partner with people in Ohio. It's just they've been growing kind of rapidly over the last 10 years or so. I want to say they started in, well, less than 10 years, yeah, because they started, I think, around 2015, 2016. And they've been growing rapidly, hiring research staff and technical service providers. They have a lot of fact sheets on their website. They have an agroforestry podcast that they do. They've got webinars. They are conducting research. They have some online courses specifically for technical service providers that are available on their website. They also have so Savannah Institute itself is a nonprofit. They have a spin-off for-profit business that does agroforestry installation and technical service and design work as well. The University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry, again, is a really great resource. In particular, both Denise and I have attended their Agroforestry Academy, which is currently like a set of online modules and then in-person tours. This photograph is from a chestnut and wheat operation that I visited when I went to Agroforestry Academy back in 2018. Lot of great resources there, a lot of great networking opportunities. And like I came away at least with like, a flash drive with all sorts of information and a physical handbook, guidebook for agroforestry practices, and things like that are really useful as a technical service provider to help provide resources to growers. They've got a number of research publications out. They've got a lot of economic incentive tools, so like evaluating the economic prospects of different crops. They host a symposium every year. This last year was focused on silvopasture. They do I think monthly newsletter, might be quarterly, I can't remember. That's got a lot of great resources in it. Trees for Grazers is a little more close to home. They're based out of Pennsylvania. Rural Action, I think, is going to talk more about their partnership with them, so I'm not going to go into it too much. And then there's the USDA National Agroforestry Center, which has both economic and design tools. They've got research, and they have a very nice webinar library that you can check out. So basically, there is actually a lot of info out there. It's just like, we're trying to spread the word about it because, a lot of people, not a lot of people, especially farmers, haven't really heard of these practices. And like research is building. I didn't put this on the list because it's sort of more variable, but there is a World Agroforestry Congress that happens every 3 years. Not all of it applies to our temperate zone, but I went to the one that was most recent in Quebec City. A lot of great resources and connections there. This next one is coming up, I think, next year in Rwanda. But it bounces all around the world. They have online resources as well. Again, they focus on both tropical and temperate systems, but that's another great potential resource and connection. I made a lot of great connections with some agroforestry practitioners in France and Italy and Spain while I was there. Really, really cool program there.
So with that idea of these learning opportunities that are out there, and this was Mark and I saying, where have we done a lot of our learning and professional development in agroforestry, so we could share that with you all. Think about, as we grow this in Ohio, could we have an agroforestry academy in Ohio, like work with Mizzou, University of Missouri, to bring that to Ohio? It's a real possibility, and this, I think, this group that AJ brought together could be a catalyst for something like that. Now, there are a lot of technology-based professional development opportunities for agroforestry too. They are often on a GIS platform. So something like NRCS Web Soil Survey, a lot of us are probably familiar with, and it is an important tool for agroforestry too, for that foundational land planning. And then it is open to any of us and the public. There's tons of great information in it. A newer product that's out there is put together by Propagate, which was mentioned in the list of partners that AJ had up on the screen earlier in the presentation. It's called Overyield, and it is a software for purchase that a technical service provider can use to help a landowner develop an agroforestry management plan, as well as run specific economics on their site. Super duper powerful. Mark and I have had the opportunity to use it, as Central State has a license right now. So what I want to do is I'm going to switch screens because I wanted to bring up one of our model agroforestry plans that we did on a small scale site. So give me a sec while I stop my screen share and switch what I'm doing here. All right, this is a picture of the Overyield software as it comes up. Are you guys seeing my screen I want you to see? It doesn't look like it.
I think I can see it.
Okay, great.
You zoom pretty far out, but yeah.
Yes, exactly right. So this is how it comes up when you start out. And if you use the Web Soil Survey, it's going to be kind of similar. As you start out with a aerial view, you can add contour lines and then zoom into your site as you work on what you're doing. What this software allows you to do is to draw in by rows. In this case, this is an agroforestry planting, crop by crop, adjust the spacing, the appropriate acreage. This is a small site adjacent to hay production and corn and soybeans on the edge of a outside of a community. So kind of a combination of suburban into very rural space. But this is mostly a black locust and chestnut planting. On the right side of the screen, every crop that is in the planting is listed with easy reference to the number of plants you're putting in for the acreage that you have. You can turn on and off layers. That's on the left-hand side of the screen. So I have this one set up as a chestnut planting in 2 layers, 40-foot spacing on each layer. So it's 20-foot spacing overall. So you have the option to take out trees over time and run economic data for that. Black locust is in the mix for this one as an interplanting or in between chestnut rows with the intention of harvesting eventually for fence posts that go into the organic sector as something that was identified as a limited resource for folks fencing in certified organic operations, and then a little bit of some of the other specialty crops like elderberry that come into production quickly. So you have some nice stuff in terms of visual field work, and then you have an economic tab, which I'm switching over to right now. And it takes each crop and shows you yield over time, it goes out 30 years. So you can really see when the big brown line that peaks really high, like when chestnuts are in full production, high production. It shows you when you start taking out some chestnuts, you're thinning out individual trees for a bit because they're shading each other, growing into each other, and then production going up. It also allows you to break things down into what kind of revenue you might see, capital costs, and it gives you, like, if you throw everything into this, the best equipment in the world, which we know most people won't be able to add everything in, but it gives you tons of options. And then it even has an opportunity to look at carbon over time in that modeling too. It's a really powerful software that's out there. It's interesting to see that these things are coming out and more species are being added to this one every time. Mark and I are excited to have this available for us as a group of TSBs to look at how things work, and also for farmers as well that we work with folks. Again, it is a licensed software that's out there.
And I just wanted to add into that. So like the software comes with some existing like pre-filled resources for certain crops, but you are and including the economics and costs, but you are able to go in and individually modify literally everything to fit different producer needs and things like that. And it actually is integrated into Web Soil Survey to a degree. They're building that capacity up, but there are some things where you can actually take a plot and it will evaluate whether or not the land is suitable for that crop based on Web Soil Survey data and some other GIS data that's out there. And the capacity for that is only increasing. So this is an exciting tool. It's got a lot of power, but it's also still in development and getting better at every time, every month, really.
And just like this tool is getting better over time, so are we as agroforestry, a community of agroforestry technical service providers. The more we work together, the stronger we're going to be, the better we're going to serve Ohio. And we have lots of opportunities to grow agroforestry in Ohio. So let's keep collaborating. An idea to throw out, and I think AJ, you kind of almost prepped for this comment. We don't have practices specific to Ohio agroforestry throughout NRCS yet. The only way we get there is if we work towards it together and help NRCS. So we don't have a silver, we can do it. We have models in other states. So why can't we work together for that? And what else do we want to work together to do in agroforestry in Ohio, right? So great opportunities. So I say, let's work together. This is the Central State Ag and Natural Resource Team as regional educators, and the map that shows you where we work in the region. So if you don't know us yet, you can get in touch with us. Also, I'll note Leslie Horner's on the call. She has agroforestry and forestry skills that are strong as well. Does a lot of work in the Southeast Ohio Interagency Forestry Management Team too. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And yeah, ditto. I love the idea of the Agroforestry Academy. I'm just really glad to have people in one space. Hopefully we can continue to gather in a similar space and then work together. Now everyone's got a lot going on, and it's always a struggle to be like, hey, you want to do more stuff? But if we all do it together, this makes it so much easier.
And I know Denise has had some communication from at least one person at Mizzou that's expressed some interest in bringing Agroforestry Academy outside of Mizzou. Nothing official yet, but I think it seems like there's interest. I think that's something we can definitely work on building. I think Doug mentions maybe in 2025. So that maybe as we work on this year, collaborating, communicating, I think that's something we can try to work on.
And speaking of Mizzou, there was one question, I answered it in the chat, but Dakota asked if the Agroforestry Academy is free, and it unfortunately is not. I believe it's around $750 if you pay outright. However, there are scholarships available for anyone who wants to attend that. I'm going through it myself. It actually starts tonight. That's the first session. So got pretty stoked for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it there. So lastly, we have last but definitely not least, Rural Action, who is doing a lot of the work in the state and really just knocking things out of the park. So we have Andrea Miller. I'm always calling you Andrea. Sorry about that. We have Andrea Miller, who is their Sustainable Forestry Program Manager, and Tom Redfern, who's their award-winning Director of Sustainable Agriculture. And they're going to talk to us a little bit more about the work that they do. So I'm going to turn it over to you whenever you're ready.
Cool, thanks AJ. Just get my screen shared here.
Thanks a lot, AJ. Great to be here.
Cool, can everyone see this?
Yep. Okay.
As AJ said, I'm Tom Redfern, and I'm here with Andrea Miller. And we're going to talk about our sustainable forestry program. And we're really excited for this project and for all our partnerships. So rural action's been around since the early 1990s. And basically, our mission is to build a more just economy with the assets that we do have. And here in eastern, southeastern Ohio, a huge asset that we have is our woodlands. So we work to support landowners interested in economically, ecologically, culturally sustainable methods of forest production. And rural action is made up of multiple program areas, and three of which are watershed restoration, agriculture, and forestry. And all these program areas are interfacing all throughout the state with landowners. So we're often in a good position to share resources with landowners. We're proud of that.
So the forestry program, we can kind of break down what we offer into 3 different categories. So we have our resources. So we have some publications, we offer mentorships, we put on conferences, collaborative workshops, webinars, and then we also have an herb hub, which I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we also provide technical assistance. So we do site visits, management plans, and then agroforestry direct financial assistance. And then we also have our planting stock sales where we sell American ginseng in the fall and ramps in the spring. And so some of the publications that we have, in 2021, we worked with the USDA National Agroforestry Center to produce case studies and videos. This is where we interviewed farmers within the southeastern Ohio region who are doing forest farming, producing mushrooms, producing maple syrup, producing other non-timber forest products, interviewed them and created videos that will soon be available on the National Agroforestry website. We also have our Forest Farmer Handbook, which was produced in collaboration with United Plant Savers in 2017 through a conservation innovation grant. And then just this past year, in 2023, in collaboration with Appalachian Sustainable Development in Virginia, we produced version 2 of the handbook. And so we added a new chapter on Solomon seal. We also have an alley cropping case study where we interviewed a farmer that is adopted alley cropping on his farm within southeastern Ohio, talking about his planting plan, lessons learned, things he might have done differently, why he got into alley cropping. So it's a really, really great resource for folks who might be interested in doing alley cropping. We also have our non-timber forest product, 1-pager artwork and fact sheets, where it's some really beautiful artwork on the front and on the back. It's a basic cultivation guide for the species that has the artwork on the other side. We have our woodland owner toolkit, and then we have some forest farming enterprise budgets that we've produced as well. And those will also be available on the National Agroforestry website soon. So there on the left is the Forest Farmers Handbook that we produced in just last year. That's the version 2. It has a chapter on black cohosh, American ginseng, golden seal, Solomon seal, ramps, and bloodroot. And then there on the right is the alley cropping case study. So the Forest Farmer Handbook, that is downloadable for free on the Rural Action website. There's also a number of great resources there. And then that alley cropping case study, that can be downloaded from the USDA National Agroforestry Center's website. And then here is a picture of what the 1-pagers that I talked about. So we've got the artwork on one side, and then on the back, it's got a cultivation quick guide that talks about site selection, site preparation and maintenance, planting, and propagation. And this was in collaboration with Rural Action, the ABFFC, the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition, and the USDA through the Conservation Innovation Grant Program.
Our whole farm project is a beginning farmer project we've been doing since 2020 with funding through the USDA, NIFA, Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Project, and it's a 12-week series, which includes a weekly webinar on a pertinent topic. But the key thing is that a mentor, a seasoned, if you would, farmer is paid to share their intellectual capital, their experiences, their insights with the beginning farmer. And we do this with the ag program. We've done many of this, but specific to forest farmers, we've done 23 since 2020, and we're doing 3 right now through the partnership with the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer. And once again, the whole term to think about is the whole farm. We think of it as whole farm because the whole idea is that here in eastern southern Ohio, we're 60% wooded and many small farms. So how can we diversify the income for the producers through the woods? And it builds on something Rural Action's been doing for decades, where peer-to-peer education, we pay the farmer to be the educator.
So in terms of education and resources, since 2021, we've, in collaboration with the ABFFC, we've put on the Southern Ohio Forest Farming Conference. This has taken place at United Plant Savers in Rutland, Ohio, which is in Meigs County. And since 2021, we have reached over 150 attendees. The conference is very popular. So we've decided that even though this grant stream that's been funding the conference is about to end this year, we're going to continue to try to have the conference through other funding sources. And we just received some additional funding through another funding source. So we will be having the Southern Ohio Forest Farming again for the next 3 years. Probably in October, yeah. And so as far as our workshops go, just since 2020, we've put on 25 collaborative workshops, reaching over 500 attendees. We've partnered with Central State a lot on these workshops as well. We've done some log inoculation workshops with them, partnered with other organizations within the region. But our main focus is basically NTFP production, so ginseng cultivation workshops, ramp cultivation workshops. We just did a golden seal cultivation workshop a couple weeks ago. So really trying to reach as many folks in the community as possible, and specifically trying to work with beginning farmers. So I mentioned the Herb Hub at the beginning of this presentation. We received funding from the ARC to replicate the Herb Hub that exists in Duffield, Virginia, that ASD started. So the Herb Hub is going to be a processing and aggregation center for producers to bring their field and forest botanicals to. The goal of the Herb Hub is to provide producers with access to markets and premium price points for their herbs. So the location of the Herb Hub is going to be in Athens County, and it's going to be located at AceNet. And we'll have a varying range of processing equipment, from a commercial dehydrator to a walk-in drying room to root washer, and then commercial kitchen space that producers can utilize to process and aggregate their herbs up to spec. And so we talked a little bit about some of the resources that we offer. We offer site visits. So I've just pulled some data since 2020. I wanted to pull some relevant data, but the forestry program has been working in the NTFP sector for a very long time, probably around 20 years, I would say. But just since 2020, the forestry team has conducted 69 NTFP forestry site visits. This is where we go out onto private land and work with a private landowner or a landholder to assess their property for NTFP production potential. So accompanying that in-person site visit, they also receive a management plan. So since 2020, we've conducted 69 forestry site visits, and then 69 landowners have also received a management plan, which has covered 4,770 acres. And this is all within the Appalachian region of Ohio. So as far as forest farming financial assistance goes, Ian talked a lot about this. So we are a partner with Virginia Tech and ASD and some other organizations with the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation, the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program. So since 2022, we have funded 9 forest farming producers through this program. And then Ian also mentioned farm tours. We're going to be doing 2 forest farming farm tours this year. More to come on that. We'll be advertising them soon, but they are scheduled. And then as far as silvopasture financial assistance goes, through the same grant program, the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program, we've been able to fund 12 different producers in 5 states. Again, this is since 2022. And then this summer, we will be hosting a silvopasture farm tour as well. So 3 total farm tours this year. And again, more information on that to come.
All right, and we're really excited to be hosting With Trees for Grazers, who's a partner in this project, a 3-day training at United Plant Savers. I think there still might be some spots. 2 of the days, the first day and the 3rd day will be class type sessions, but the 2nd day will be open to a lot more people. It'll be field tours at 2 Athens County silvopasture working farms. So we're really excited about that. It's like a partnership with Mount Folly Enterprises out of Kentucky that has a climate smart grant, working from like all throughout the Ohio Valley, beginning in West Virginia into Kentucky on regenerative and climate smart practices for livestock producers. Because the exciting thing with the silvopasture, it's beyond the, it's huge positive impacts for the planet, but also it puts pounds on the animals. And it's really adoptable for sheep, for chickens, for cattle, for dairy. So it's a huge opportunity.
So through that conservation innovation grant, we partnered with ASD in 2020. One of the goals of that project was to trial medicinal herbs and shrubs in alley cropping systems, which is a little bit alternative to what most alley cropping systems have growing in them. So through that project, we were able to establish 3 alley cropping demonstration sites in southeastern Ohio. We have 2 down in Meigs County and 1 in Athens County. And we have a 1/4 acre in alley cropping production.
And real quick, we forgot to add a big partnership that we have also is with Route 9 Chestnut Cooperative up in Carroll County. They have six producers all working together, and what we did with them was a partnership through SARE to look at value adding to the chestnut, because there's a high value with the chestnut that's not been impacted with a mite, the grade A. But we're looking at working with millers to mill the grade B chestnut to drive that market on the other.
Then I mentioned our planting stock sales. Since 2014, Rural Action sold 80 pounds of American ginseng seed annually. And then since 2021, we've been selling 40 pounds of ramp bulbs in the spring. And we're reaching over 120 planting stock buyers annually, some of which are beginning farmers.
And we mentioned earlier how Rural Action is made up of multiple program areas. Watershed restoration is like a big cornerstone of Rural Action, with the roots in mitigation of acid mine drainage, which is the orange water you might have seen if you're ever driving in eastern Ohio, where the mines weren't reclaimed early on and have impacted our environment. So we've done a lot to restore that over the years. And currently we're working throughout the state with the watershed. But a big thing, like we heard earlier in presentations, was the riparian buffer restoration, which is a huge need with erosion, etc., and to improve the quality of the lands. So here's some data from the last couple of years.
And then another service that Rural Action offers is our conservation cohort. This is comprised of a team of AmeriCorps members who work with both private and non-private landowners and other nonprofit partners to do restoration work. So there's a number of differing services that they offer, ranging from invasive plant removal to tree plantings, some of which are riparian buffer plantings. They'll also have capability to do silvopasture installations and alley cropping installations as well. And then this is just a list of some of our current agroforestry projects, looking at some cultivation of golden seal through a specialty crop block grant, the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program, which is a partnership with Virginia Tech, the ABFFC, Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition. Rural Action is a founding member. We're working on some additional one-page fact sheet and artworks with Holden Arboretum up in Cleveland. We have our conservation cohort, which is an expansion of our AmeriCorps program. We're working with the new ARC Arise program on workforce development surrounding forest farming and agroforestry within the region. We also do our internships and educational field days for agroforestry careers. This is an NRCS cooperative agreement. And then again, offering those stipends to mentors to work with mentee beginning farmers. And I really liked what Denise said about partnerships. You know, we're all stronger together. Wanted to throw this page on here, just some of our partnerships. We wouldn't be able to do all of the great work that we do. And, you know, we have such a deep body of work and it wouldn't be possible without all of our partners. And that,
So big thank you to all our partners.
big thank you to all of our partners.
And there's a lot more than even's on this slide.
Yeah. Could have had like 5 slides probably, but. And that is it.
That's neat.
Awesome, thank you. As you can see, they have a lot going on, a lot of resources. I have one quick question for you actually about the conservation cohort. Is that a service that landowners within Southern Ohio are able to have access to assist with installations and land management?
Exactly.
Okay. And is that a paid service or?
It can be paid, yes.
Okay, cool. I did not know that. That's
We
right.
can work things out depending on what the project is. Like we partner right now with the Athens Conservancy that owns a lot of land here. We're partnering with the state of Ohio on some properties. And we are partnering with some private landowners.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for those great presentations and sharing a lot of this information. There's a few things in the chat going on, but essentially if anyone has any questions, this is definitely the time to ask them, especially since all of these wonderful professionals are gathered right here. We'll obviously try to have continued communications and gatherings going forward. It seems like everyone is interested in doing that, so just collaborating those efforts. And yeah, one thing that Jonathan just mentioned is trying to make sure that we need to encourage the correct site inventory and analysis up front with potential participants, so that way people understand better what plants would perform best on their lands. I think that's really important. And yeah, just continue to have those conversations going forward. So the session has been recorded, and I'm going to send it out to everyone that is present and also anyone who was not present today. But yeah, I'll just one last time ask if there's any more questions before we adjourn.
I guess I just want to add, don't think we explicitly mentioned this, but like, so since CSU has the license to the overyield software, if any of you don't want to purchase that license but want to play around with it a little bit, reach out to Denise or I, and we can like work with you and maybe like show you it in a little more detail. And like we're like active, like one of the reasons we got the license and we got this with Propagate's blessing is to work with especially limited resource farmers who couldn't afford to buy the license for themselves. So, you know, if you have farmers you're working with who could benefit from access to that software, you know, we're happy to work with you on it.
Nice, awesome, great to hear that. Cool. Well, it seems like there aren't any lingering questions. I will encourage everyone to still stay in contact with everyone, or you can always reach out to me. I'm going to be in contact with everyone all the time. Always pestering people. But yeah, it's been a great time. I've learned a lot, and I will send this out to everyone who is around. So thank you all, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, AJ, as we're closing, just a quick pitch.
Mhm.
We've been having conversations with a lot of you one-on-one about what might be useful that we can help use our resources to deliver. I think this webinar was fantastic, and I hope we do another one at some point just to kind of keep the network strong. We've brought up this possibility, but emerged from those conversations is trying to fit in a single event that would be like a summit. And July looked like a target. July's pretty soon, so we'd have to get really rolling to pull that off. I'll be reaching out if I could share, if I can get access maybe to the registration list and so forth, maybe by email to get feedback as to whether that's going to work. If we don't do July, we got to skip over all the great things that Rural Action and others have on the early fall catalog and maybe find a window in the winter. But what we heard from people, just like having the organizations and technical service providers get together in the same room, having a single event that really elevates multiple kinds of agroforestry, so silvopasture, forest farming, there's a lot of side events or focused events, but maybe a single summit where we can bring producers and offer something of value. Maybe speakers or practitioners, preferably from out of state, that are doing some great work that Ohio doesn't get to see very often. And then we have the resources to pull this off. I just want to make sure if we design something, we do it at the right time and the right place in the right way. So expect a follow-up is the bottom line.
Got it. Awesome. Great. Yeah, I would love to see that summit happen. Also would love to offer support as well from the TNC standpoint. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Doug. And yeah, like either access to the registrants or you can send that information to me and I can send it along to the registrants. But yeah, we'll definitely be sending that out.
With that idea of great stuff that's going on, Andrew and Tom, you mentioned the Southern Ohio Forest Farmers conference workshop that you guys have done in the past. And I think a lot of what you've done in the past ties to what Doug was just talking about doing too, bringing people together. Could you, if you have enough information, talk more about what that event looks like? If maybe we could build off of that little bit you gave us earlier.
Yeah, so it's been funded through it's been subsidized by the ABFFC, which the ABFFC is funded by a Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Grant. And basically it is a 3-day conference, starts on Friday evening, runs all day Saturday, and then ends Sunday afternoon at United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary in Rutland, Ohio. And we have a number of differing topics that are covered, from NTFP production to root division, cultivation, harvest, post-harvest handling and drying. We've done bees as a non-timber forest product. We've done grafting workshops, elderberry production, pawpaw production, persimmon production, really just a wide range of differing topics. And the speakers that we invite are people that we have worked with in the past, some of which are even beginning farmers. There have been a couple instances where folks have come as an attendee in 2021 and they presented as a presenter in 2023. So that's really cool. But the primary target is really beginning farmers and folks who are, just now getting interested in, starting their forest farming enterprise. We've also done some mushroom workshops as well. We've done business planning, apothecary planning, value-added product demonstrations. So really trying to just cover, I think the one of our mottos one year was like from seed to sale. So really just covering everything in between regarding forest farming.
And I think the first one we did was in
2016.
2017 or 16. Yeah. It's been a big partnership with Virginia Tech for one.
Huge with Virginia Tech.
But it's also like a very peer-to-peer educational model also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they also have a camping option if you're into camping, or at least they used
One
to.
of the most beautiful places in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Awesome. I'm glad it's in October. It usually coincides with the Black Farmers Conference. I haven't been able to go, so I'm excited that it's a little bit later this year. It's going to be super awesome.
Well, I may have misspoke, but
It might be in October. Don't quote us yet.
Oh no. Okay. I'll pray.
that's a shout out for October.
Mm-hmm.
Got you.
Yeah, and we heavily advertised that event, so y'all be in the loop.
Yeah, you'll.
Awesome. Great. And thanks to everyone. I had one last thing I was gonna say and I forgot it, so it must not be that important. But yeah, I'll give everyone back 18 minutes every day. But yeah, thank you for coming. It's super awesome, and then we'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you.